How do you break down looking at buildings? That's a really hard question. And in the end, I think you're trying to look at a building the way you understand a person.
It would be difficult for me to generalize about architecture, the process of going from idea to finished building. That's always the challenge of an architect, to do that.
I think in these awards, I would say that I'm looking for buildings that I feel have a sort of sense of integrity which should go right through from the concept to the detail.
I have a way of describing what is architecture and what you memorize from it, what you bring back home, an impression. It can be a ray of light, a feeling in a room, but respect on what is good architecture comes from your capacity of recognizing what is good architecture. And for me, what is good architecture is one that challenges your mind and touch your soul.
Well, I wasn't sure at all why I was here, really, because I'm not an architect and I don't even play one on TV. I'm just the son of an architect. But I'm interested profoundly in talking to architects. I think that architects have lots of things to say about the world, about each other, about where we're going, about our culture. You all are such very sensitive people. But one wants to make sure that there's an interesting mix. And I think you chose very wisely. You have a really, really interesting mix of people in the 3 jurors this year.
What I look for in evaluating the work is consistency, a sort of internal logic. The word I would use is integrity. I mean, to me, this is what architecture is. It's the reason that I can look at you and you can look at me, and we know there's a skeleton under there. We can't see it, but it's a sublimated structure. There's something that creates the form. And in the case of architecture, that something begins with an idea, a concept, but it also begins with the requirements for the building. People use it. Architecture in that way is different than a lot of other arts.
I think a lot of people don't know what architecture is for and don't think it's essential. So a lot of people just think, I need square footage and I need it as cheap as possible. I think that architecture should not just accommodate, but should be an enhancement to people's lives. I think it should be about the user and the use, and probably very particularly about the place in which it exists as well.
There's an enormous attention to that interaction between the built environment and landscape. How one engages the land. What is one doing with the land? What is one doing with vistas, with views, with trees? And that's great to see, and I think gives us a lot to talk about and think about.
I was particularly interested by the visionary category, which is about unbuilt world and how it can promote good architecture in a place like Northwest. We're looking for first an impression of the project, which comes a bit artificially from the drawing we look at. And we have to keep in mind that as people, we evolve with time and we will live differently. We have to address those questions too, as what will be the space for the future? Are we going to live together? What will be the family in the future? This is the kind of question that should be raised in a competition like that, and this is the responsibility we have as a jury, to find the projects that are changing things.
I'm very interested in context and response to context. It's a critical factor in architecture that there would be an attention paid to the craft and the detailing, precisely how a wall is made, precisely how a window sits in a wall. So if the concept is about making a simple form, you work to hone down and to sort of distill what you're doing.
For me, material has to disappear towards the experience of the space, which is the first feeling I want to recognize in a project.
Depending on the building type, sometimes it's a successful building if people don't maybe absolutely notice the detail of the building, but they just feel comfortable and happy there.
For me, the experience of a space is essential. To visit some of those works will be an enlightened experience, to verify if that feeling I had in looking at photography is real or not, or to give a second chance to a project that seems to promise something, but not too clearly since the images are not that good. And then come back in the bus with a new feeling about it that will change completely our perception.
I would say that I'm looking for buildings that I feel have a sort of sense of integrity themselves about their material, how they're built, how they respond to people, the use, the context, the climate, the orientation, where the sun comes from, and somehow out of all those things making something, a piece of work which makes sense of all that and which has a kind of spirit of its own.
Part of what we suffer from in the world in so many areas is breaking things down to the degree that you lose the essence of something. One of the things that I really like about working with this group is they're trying to see beyond any particular category. They really are looking at the whole building. They're interested in the entire thing. And that's where I think it gets very complicated, because you see elements in every one of these projects that are interesting and exemplary, in every single one. And the hardest thing is holding all those things together and getting them all to balance and somehow have a wholeness to them. And that's frankly a lot of luck. And if it works, it's magic.
For me, this award is very much a way to promote good architecture and to promote the development of new ideas and push on those ideas.
You know, awards ceremonies are always difficult, because if you win, it's great. If you don't win, it's real pain. And what do you really, at the end of the day, what do you really get out of it? And my hope is that when you go to something like this, you come away with something that inspires you, not just something that, you know, makes you feel good or bad, but something that gives you something to chew on, to think about.
The most difficult part of it, from our perspective as jurors, is to be able to communicate somehow that the purpose of the program is to elevate. The purpose of the program is to encourage. The purpose of the program is to educate the public that there is this thing called architecture that has loftier goals than just building a building and collecting the rent.
I think architects have a really important role socially to play in terms of society, and I think as an architect, one of the most exciting things is to think that you do have that role, to think that in some way the work you're doing is contributing to building a sense of society and a culture in which people can live their lives.